Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 220 based on novel. So let's start. Cripple was furious and shouted, "Mua, Grandpa Cripple's good traditions have all been forgotten by you. You only know how to be brave and fierce like Butcher, and you will get cut in half sooner or later too. Butcher, what's this expression of yours? Put your knife down. We talk amiably here. I'm only thinking what's best for Mua." He carefully pushed the knife away from his neck. Qin Mu smiled at him. "Grandpa Cripple, don't worry, I know what I'm doing." The so-called Emperor's Throne technique he uses was created by his predecessors and not by him, so it's still up to his comprehension and cultivation to how much power he can unleash. This will make the technique drop by a realm to numinous sky technique. Besides, eternal peace is undergoing a reform while the celestial heavens definitely hasn't done so, which means that Chijui's Emperor's Throne technique will be another level lower, going down to Jade Capital technique. With just a few words, he lowered an Emperor's Throne technique by 2 levels. Even if it's a Jade Capital technique, it's still a few levels higher. True God, Jade Lake, God Execution Stage, and only then Jade Capital. Cripple said coldly. Qin Mu was brimming with confidence. Because my True God technique is self-created, I can unleash all of its power, which raised it by a level, making it equivalent to a Jade Lake technique. In addition, I'm the Overlord body, so I'm basically on par with God Execution Stage technique, which makes the difference not that large. Cripple was speechless from anger. Cripple, this is the reason why you still can't cross the Divine Bridge and enter the Celestial Palaces. You are too timid, afraid of this and that, afraid that you can't cross the Divine Bridge. Actually, your cultivation is enough to do it. Luckily, Mua didn't learn from you or else he would never succeed in anything, Granny Sai said. Cripple couldn't be angry at her and just said angrily, "Dote on him more, I don't care anymore. I'll see him get beaten to death sooner or later." Even though he said so, he was still extremely concerned about Qin Mu. Back when Granny Sai had picked him from the river, he was the first in the village to accept Qin Mu. Granny Sai was annoyed at him wetting the bed and sent him away, but Cripple had brought him back time and time again without any complaint. After Qin Mu grew slightly older, he didn't have a playmate, so it was always this old boy that played together with him. Of course, he tended to bully Qin Mu, stealing the candy Granny Sai had bought for him, or seizing toys old Ma had made for him. It was always him who made Qin Mu cry, and then was beaten by Granny Sai until she was satisfied. During those years, village chief had been dispirited, Blind's Dao heart was broken by Xing'an, Granny Sai was worrying about Li Tianxing, who was in her Dao heart, mute only forged silently without talking to anyone, apothecary had a buttload of love debts, deaf didn't bother about anyone, old Ma was reminded of his departed wife and children when he saw Qin Mu, while Butcher was frequently crazy, because he knew the truth about the sky. Back then, they all had yet to undo the knots in their hearts. Cripple was the only one who had simply been forced into the village by Imperial Preceptor. He had a light burden, and so he was able to treat Qin Mu wholeheartedly. When Fu Riluo saw the group squabbling, he was bewildered. The relationships between gods were usually one of politeness and courtesy. Even if they were enemies, both sides would usually treat one another with respect. It was rare to see gods quarreling every day like the gods of disabled elderly village. Zhehuali, you need to be careful when fighting with young Master Qi. Fu Riluo didn't stop Zhehuali from fighting altogether. Now that you have finished your apprenticeship, there's nothing more I can teach you. It's the same for your other teacher, Luo Wushuang. From today onwards, you need to comprehend with your own cultivation. Fighting with young Master Qi is your wish, and so I won't stop you, just go. As the respectable king of the devil race, he had an abnormal bearing. Even if he was the enemy, his way of doing things was still very admirable. Zhehua gave his thanks and looked at Qi. There seemed to be a knife light flashing in his eyes. His knife skill had just taken shape, and he desperately needed someone to confirm his abilities. Fu Riluo, this disciple of yours won't be a match for young Master Qi, Lu Li said in a low voice. You have no idea how terrifying his inheritance is. His master is an ancient big shot of the celestial heavens, a prehistoric existence. Great ruins was created by that existence. Fu Riluo's left face's voice was indifferent. So what? From the ancient times until now, paths, skills, and divine arts have all changed so much that prehistoric things might no longer be powerful. You're making the celestial heavens too much of a legend. Even if Zhehua isn't a devil, he has still inherited our spirit. He becomes stronger when facing the strong, and he fights fiercer and fiercer. He also has extremely high comprehension, and was able to comprehend the Tao when Heaven Knife slew Sun's sovereign with one knife. Who else could have done a similar thing? Zhehua might not lose this battle. Lu Li snorted and didn't say anything else. ZHNNG. The knife light shone, and Zhehua made his move. He used Luo Wushuang's knife skills, and the knife light started to split. The demon knife in his hands instantly became excited, and the demon eye opened to lock its gaze on Qi. When the knife light split, it multiplied again and again. Qi stood motionless. Suddenly though, flames fluttered behind him as if he was a phoenix flapping its wings. The wings went before him, sending feathers forward. They were gorgeous and didn't break even when they collided with the knife light. In an instant, Zhehua's fission knife skills separated in 10,000 knife lights, yet, when they collided with the feathers of the phoenix, they could not break through the feathers. On the contrary, the flaming feathers broke through the knife lights and rushed at Zhehua. His body suddenly vanished before reappearing the next instant. Every step he took, his body would pause for a moment, and the demon knife in his hand would slash down. All kinds of basic knife forms were executed, and they burst forth like a huge sun, a devil god splitting a mountain, or flowers and leaves of a lotus pond. All kinds of apparitions poured out, filling the sky with knife lights slashing at Qi. His speed was extremely fast, and the speed of his young true god's corporeal body was such that he left a series of afterimages. This speed was no inferior to that of Qin Mu. Such fast speed and strong corporeal body allowed him to leave afterimages in an area of 100 fields around Qi. They surrounded him and attacked as one. Not only that, even the sky was filled with Zhehua's figures. They were horizontal, lying flat, standing diagonally, and even upside down. They attacked from all kinds of strange angles. Qi still stood unmoving. Yet he seemed to be able to see the sky and the earth. All around him, his phoenix feathers bloomed continuously, and more of them appeared. They gradually filled the area of several yards, preventing the demon knife of Zhehua from getting close. Some of them even chased after Zhehua. Even if his speed was fast and his battle power was strong, Qin Mu and the rest could see that the phoenix feathers were a great threat to him. Zhehua's speed was like a clap of rolling thunder, yet each one seemed to be measured, and the distance they covered was exactly the same. If the places where his feet touched the ground were connected together, the first 2 steps set the boundaries of a circle, next 3 made a triangle, the 4 after a square, then 5 a pentagon, and so on and so forth. The more footsteps there were, the closer they came to a perfect circle. All of the shapes used Qi as the center, and Zhehua swirled around him as he walked. Furthermore, he wasn't walking on a flat surface, but a 3-dimensional space that was sometimes far and sometimes close, sometimes above and sometimes below, sometimes to the left and sometimes to the right. If all the lines were connected, the sight would definitely be extremely dazzling. It was also because of this that his body movements and knife skills were unpredictable. His movements had to have been inherited from divine knife Luo Wushuang. That man's footsteps, as well as his knife, were extremely strict. Yet Zhihua slowly left further and further away from his opponent. Qi Jui still stood in the same spot without moving. The space taken up by the phoenix feathers grew, forcing Zhihua to continuously fall back. The feathers were his divine arts, not his spirit weapon. With just his divine art, he made Zhihua unable to get close. Not only that, the phoenix feathers gradually formed a kind of apparition. It was a tree, an ancient parasol tree that was overflowing with light. It stood tall behind the youth, its crown covering the sky. The light flowed down in various colors, and Qi Jui was like a god under the tree bathed under a colored light. The people observing the battle couldn't help the grim expressions that surfaced on their faces. It was especially evident on Granny Sai. Her spells were the strongest in disabled elderly village, and she had great comprehension of divine arts. After experiencing the baptism of the heart devil, she was on the verge of entering the path with spell divine arts, which meant that her future was bright. Her divine arts could be ranked first in disabled elderly village, and in the whole eternal peace empire. Yet Qi Jui's divine art made her see an even more beautiful and profound level of attainment in divine arts. The ancient parasol tree wasn't the divine art that Qi Jui had comprehended, but a divine art of his technique. Qi Jui had only used what he learned, yet the power of the divine art surpassed all those on the same realm. Just based on the exquisiteness of the divine art, Granny Sai admitted that she was inferior. The ancient parasol tree was condensed from countless feather divine arts. The construction was so exquisite that it was something she had never seen before. And Qi Jui's power was finally ready. Mua, listen to your grandpa cripple and admit defeat, Granny Sai said to Qin Mu. He is yet to use his spirit weapon, and he is already able to do this much. His cultivation is terrifyingly dense. His spell divine art can already be called a Dao spell. You won't be looked down upon if you admit defeat. Qin Mu fisted his hands tightly while staring nervously at the battlefield. He was oblivious to her words. The ancient parasol tree was being nourished more and continued to spread out, becoming even more perfect. There was even a phoenix's nest on among its branches, constructed from feathers. At this moment, Zhihua was already 50 yards away from Qi Jui. Even though his attacks were fierce, they no longer posed any threat to Qi Jui. Once the phoenix's nest was constructed, a phoenix gradually took shape within it. Indescribable pulses went out as the phoenix grew more and more perfect. It was a 9-headed phoenix, with 9 slender and elegant necks that were either raised up or hung down from the nest as it examined the surroundings. Qin Mu had felt the aura of a prehistoric beast from Qi Jui's body, and this was most likely the reason. The pulse became stronger and stronger, and the 9-headed phoenix also became more and more beautiful, more and more real. The 9-headed phoenix, an ancient parasol tree, didn't pressure only Zhihua. It was extremely terrifying to everyone watching the surroundings. Brother Qin, didn't you want to take a look at my divine arts? Under the ancient parasol tree, Qi Jui's expression was incomparably sacred. Zhihua finally exploded under the huge pressure, and he slashed down with his knife. It was the first knife move he had created after he had entered the path. A huge demon eye appeared behind his back and opened up. A beam of light shot on the knife with which he had slashed, and its power instantly increased drastically. It had the power of Qin Mu's opening calamity sword that could conquer every obstacle. Superb knife skills. He has the ability to fight me. The thumb and index finger of Qi Jui's right hand pinched together, and the mudra, which was like a phoenix head, smashed toward the knife light that had broken through the crown of the ancient parasol tree. A clear phoenix's cry rang out, and the 9-headed phoenix flapped its wings. However, it didn't fly towards Zhehuali, but rushed toward Qin Mu like flowing light. Zhehuali's demon knife welcomed the mudra of Qi. Once it was out, the ancient parasol tree fell onto the demon knife. Qi actually unleashed his strongest attack at Zhehuali and Qin Mu at the same time. What a strong divine art! Qin Mu couldn't help becoming excited. Before the nine-headed phoenix even arrived, the gale raised by the power of the great divine arts had already undone the ribbon tying his hair. It fluttered backward while his hair went horizontal. The skin on his face was blown into creases, and an incomparably scorching heat made it hard for him to breathe. Zhehuali and Qin Mu were on par with each other. Qi's attack on both of them at the same time showed just how confident he was. He had the confidence to take down both Zhehuali and Qin Mu, these two young experts. As the disciple of an ancient existence in the celestial heavens, he was outstanding in that high-up place. Upon coming down to the lower bound to settle matters, he looked refined and elegant, dealing with matters courteously and keeping to etiquette no matter if he was faced with a friend or a foe. However, deep within, he still looked down on the strong practitioners of the lower bound, thinking that they were all country bumpkins. His divine art had already been brewing for a long time. As he and Zhehuali tested each other, he slowly completed the great divine art, 9 phoenixes perching on ancient parasol tree. It was a great divine art of an emperor's throne technique, and once it was complete, he could crush all enemies on the same realm. It was definitely unrivaled. He wanted to take down Qin Mu and Zhehuali to show the awe of the celestial heavens, and make the country bumpkins of the lower bound understand the heavens' might. Qin Mu's blood boiled. Qi was attacking 2 people at once, but he felt as if he was facing Qi's attack by himself. It was evident that the youth from the celestial heavens was a terrifying opponent like none he'd seen before. Even though Qi's great divine art needed a long time to take shape, its power excited Qin Mu. He had never seen such a terrifying opponent before. He couldn't help letting out a loud shout, and dragon roars reverberated through his body. In that instant, they rang out 8 times as 8 voices of ancestral dragons sounded out. Overlord Body 3 elixir technique circulated 1 cycle. The 9-headed phoenix flew over with multicolored lights, which were dazzling and eye-catching. It was also giving off an astonishing power. The 9-headed phoenix reached Qin Mu's body in an instant. It had looked incomparably huge on the tree, but when it flew to Qin Mu's face, it was no bigger than a foot. But even though it had become smaller, the power had only become stronger, and the threat posed by it was even greater. Qi used a mudra, and the ancient parasol tree fell onto the demon knife. When the two came close to colliding, pulses spread out in all directions, followed by gales filled with flames and knife lights. The gales whooshed and swept out in all directions. The ground was instantly melted and became lava upon which knife lights jumped around. The moment the 2 great divine arts collided, demon knives leaped out from the lava, and the knife skill each of them executed was different. The handles of the demon knives all had a demon eyes which were extremely strange. They locked their gazes on Qi, and the path which each demon knife took seemed to be controlled by them. Small, ancient parasol trees appeared in the lava to block the demon knives. There were phoenix nests on the trees, and as they gave off multicolored light, the demon knives that had flown out from the lava were shattered. At the same time, Qin Mu's sword pellet flew up and floated in front of the heart of his brows. When his sword fingers tapped that place, the tiny sword pellet formed from 8,000 swords instantly changed its shape. 8,000 swords turned into a sword light. It became incomparably intense the moment he pointed with his sword fingers. Once he gathered all his strength and energy, he stabbed with them in the direction of the 9-headed phoenix. Swoosh! The sword light collided with the phoenix. The instant the sword light burst forth, it was thick as a pillar, but after it rushed out from his sword fingers, it became incomparably fine. It was like a cold ray. Yet upon closer inspection, it seemed to contain countless sights. The first form of his Calamity Sword was called Opening Calamity Sword, and Carefree Sword was the core of it. Carefree Sword had a total of 8 sides to its blade, and what they reflected were the runes of Overlord Body 3 elixir technique that shone in all directions. The sword light reflected the runes on the child's sword, activating its power, which was then reflected on the rest. The blade of every sword was like an 8-sided mirror, and in just an instant, all 8,000 swords lit up, executing all of their power. The 8,000 swords were continuously moving, and the path of each sword was different. In time, all of the power of the 8,000 swords gathered together in Carefree Sword. This was the marvel of Opening Calamity Sword. Based solely on appearance, Qin Mu had merely tapped the heart of his brows and gave a stab, which looked extremely simple. However, something this simple included the cultivation and comprehension of his whole life as well as the strength of his corporeal body, primordial spirit, paths, skills, and divine arts, and even his physical power. When Butcher and Fu Riluo talked about entering simple from complicated, the reason why Qin Mu had thought high of it was because he had already taken that step. In comparison to Qi Jui's great divine art, which had to take some time to activate and prepare, his great divine art Calamity Sword was abnormally fast. This was the difference between creating and learning. Qin Mu had stepped into technique entering the path and created his own Calamity Sword, so his reaction speed was incomparably quick. Jawali walked the path of knife skills entering the path. His knife skill was created by himself, but his technique was from others. He had learned Luo Wushuang's technique, as well as that of Fu Riluo, so he was slightly slower than Qin Mu in entering the path with knife skills. Yet even though it was slightly slower, it was still much faster than the time required for Qi Jui to unleash his great divine arts. However, Qi Jui cultivated an Emperor's Throne technique of the celestial heavens, and the power of his divine art was incomparably powerful. It was rarely seen in the worlds, and its power alone surpassed the techniques of true God by leaps. However, the great divine art was split into 2. The 9-headed phoenix was aimed at Qin Mu while the ancient parasol tree was thrown at Jawali. This had also split its power into 2. Kai. Qin Mu's sword light pierced through the heads of the 9-headed phoenix. Even though it looked small, it was formed from countless divine arts. Upon contact, they instantly burst forth. The power of the 8,000 swords hidden in Qin Mu's sword also burst forth. 8,000 incomparably fine swords, that were hard for the naked eye to see, jumped out and executed different sword moves, slicing apart the divine arts in the 9-headed phoenix's body. In a swift clash, the 9-headed phoenix was obliterated, and the fine sword lights rushed toward Qi Jui. When Qi Jui's divine art was broken, he gave a grunt. Suddenly, flames erupted behind him, and he twisted his neck so another 8 long necks could have space to grow. They were covered in fine phoenix feathers, which were all of 7 colors. The phoenix heads that followed rose with plumes at the top. Qi Jui looked like the emperor of the birds, and each phoenix head pecked down toward Qin Mu's sword light. The moment he diverted his attention to deal with Qin Mu, the pressure on Jawali was weakened, and countless demon knives leaped out from the lava. They combined into one and slashed down on Qi Jui. Behind the youth, his gorgeous wings that were like knives opened up. His feathers were like swords when they rose to face the incoming demon knife. Qin Mu quickly followed after the sword light. His feet moved quickly, exploding with a loud rumble. He went forward with a punch, which sucked in all the air surrounding Qi Jui. All of it was compressed into his fist. From around his fist, bolts of lightning burst forth in all directions. Qi Jui raised his hand to receive the attack, but on the other side, Jawali rushed over with long strides like a furious devil god. Devil language rang out from his mouth as his qi and blood turned violent, when he struck out with a mudra. Qi Jui's other hand clenched into a mudra, and he prepared to fight against the two of them. They came with incomparably terrifying strength, and two loud rumbles rang out. The youth gave a grunt, and his 9 heads coughed up blood at the same time. Qin Mu's other hand opened up, and the flying swords that had been sent away by the 8 phoenix heads transformed back into a sword pellet that fell into his hand. His grip grew forceful, and a snow-bright sword pillar formed by 8,000 swords swirling furiously swept towards Qi Jui's neck, ready to cut off his 9 heads. The swirling sword light sliced through the air. If Qi Jui came anywhere close to it, he would shatter into pieces and get minced into the finest chunks of meat. Zhehua grabbed his knife, and with a clank, it welcomed Qin Mu's sword. Knife lights burst forth and dispersed Qin Mu's sword light. The young man sneered and said, "He's mine. It's best if Cult Master Qin does not interfere." Their bodies trembled violently, and their arms turned numb. The demon knife and the sword pellet were jolted out from their hands from the vibrations. Qin Mu stretched his other hand out to grab the demon knife, and his footsteps crisscrossed as he slashed down. With a sneer, he said, "Zhehua, you are brainless. This person is our enemy, so we need to kill him before we can be at ease." His knife was imposing and majestic. He had inherited Butcher's wild and overbearing spirit in his knife skills, so his power was actually not much inferior to that of Zhehua with the knife. Suddenly, he felt a pain in his hand. When he looked down, he saw that the demon eye at the handle of the knife had actually grown a mouth. It was full of razor-sharp teeth, and they bit down on his palm, drawing blood. While he was busy with that, Zhehua grabbed the sword pellet. He was slightly stunned upon catching hold of it, and the sword pellet nearly fell from his hand as he had never expected for it to be so heavy. He nearly lost his grip on it. But he quickly adjusted, and the sword pellet actually burst forth with sword light. He didn't have much attainments with sword skills, and there were 8,000 swords in the sword pellet, making it hard and tiring to control, but he still raised the sword light to defend against the demon knife that Qin Mu had just used. Without an expression, he said, "He and you are the same, both of you will be killed by me. Your fate is to fall under my knife." The instant the sword and the knife collided, Zhehua gave a grunt and stumbled back. Qin Mu was proficient in knife skills, so even though he got bit by the demon knife, the power of his move was still great. On top of that, his magic power was more vigorous than Zhehua's, which made it hard for the other to defend. The knife and sword broke free from their grips, and the demon knife trembled in mid-air. Countless knife lights surrounded the 3 people and danced in the sky, colliding with one another. Qin Mu immediately used his own magic power to control the sword pellet. Sword light rushed out and transformed into a mountain and river painting to press down on them, drowning out the 3 people. Sword treading mountains and rivers. How impudent! To dare to disregard me. Qi Jui was both astonished and furious. His body shook again, and he revealed his 9 heads on the human body, which had bird claws and wings. He was about to explode with power and kill the 2 pests when Qin Mu and Zhehua suddenly worked together to severely injure him. Qi Jui coughed blood. Qin Mu and Zhehua attacked each other ruthlessly while surrounding him. Whenever he had the slightest idea to fight back, they would join hands to heavily injure him. Every time Qin Mu attacked him, Zhehua would defend him, and whenever Zhehua attacked him, he would be blocked by Qin Mu, who was throwing a tantrum. Covered in blood, Qi Jui finally felt fear, and loss spread through him. If faced with Qin Mu or Zhehua alone, he would win 10 times out of 10. But when facing the 2 of them, he could only receive a beating. Why is it like this? He was very puzzled. If Qi Jui hadn't acted generous and attacked Qin Mu and Zhehua at the same time, he would have smoothly defeated Zhehua and not landed in such a state. Qin Mu and Zhehuali knew that his great divine art was astonishing, so when he attacked them, they had first heavily injured him. Qi Jui then became their side dish while they were the only ones fighting for real. The 8,000 flying swords and countless knives were like pattering rain as they collided again and again. Qi Jui was located in the center of the battlefield, so he was always surrounded by Qin Mu's sword lights and Zhehuali's knife lights. The moment he got ready to burst forth, he suffered attacks from the two people at the same time. This kind of situation was something he had never expected. Qin Mu and Zhehuali's footsteps were quick, and they sometimes drew close and sometimes went away. The two of them mainly fought with their swords and knives while only occasionally assisting themselves with spells or clashing with their corporeal bodies. Zhehuali gradually fell into a disadvantage, and Qi Jui saw an opportunity. When Qin Mu attacked Zhehuali, he also did the same, trying to ally himself with Qin Mu to get rid of Zhehuali. But at the same moment, he felt a chill coming near his heart and lowered his head. A sword tip was sticking out from the front of his chest. Zhehuali was blown away by Qin Mu and tumbled back. He flew over 10 miles before stopping with heavy injuries. Qi Jui's 9 heads all turned around and saw Qin Mu standing in the air with a harmless smile. Qin Mu smacked forward with his hand, his fingers splayed out. It was yin-yang heaven flipping hands that he had learned from 3rd ancestor human emperor, and he used it together with 5th ancestor human emperor's 5 thunder heaven raising bell. Over 10 miles away, Zhehuali just managed to stabilize his body when the power from Qin Mu's palm went after him. Zhehuali flew up like a tattered rucksack. He got frozen into an ice sculpture by the pure yin palm force, and 5 thunder bell appeared near him. If it rang, it could shatter him into pieces since he was an ice sculpture. In the meantime, Qin Mu grabbed the sharp sword of his sword pellet with his other hand and sent his magic power into all 8,000 swords. Fine flying swords were dancing around with various sword moves in Qi Jui's body, and even rushing into his divine treasures. The second move of sword picture, sword of founding emperor sea of blood. Around Qin Mu's body, crimson spread out, and drowned him out like a sea of blood. The smile on the youth's face was reflected in it, and it seemed to become strange and evil, making people shudder without feeling cold. I've never lost a group scuffle before. Qi Jui's hair stood up on ends upon hearing his voice. The power of sword of founding emperor sea of blood exploded, and 5 thunder heaven raising bell covered Zhehuali. The bell then rang. The 2 young experts were about to die under his hands. At that moment, the bell disintegrated from Fu Riluo's majestic magic power that came from a single palm move. On the other side, Lu Li tapped on the sword tip in Qi Jui's chest. Flying swords flew backward one by one, leaving Qi Jui's body. Butcher pulled out his knife, Blind took hold of his spear, and flames rushed into the sky behind Mute. They each took a step forward while Cripple grabbed Qin Mu to fall back. In a blink, he appeared behind Butcher and the rest. Fu Riluo and Lu Li had saved Zhehuali and Qi Jui, but they didn't make any moves after that. Little friend Qi, you've stayed in the celestial heavens and don't know about the craftiness of the people in the lower bound. Now you have suffered, right? Lu Li said with a smile. Qi Jui was silent for a moment. Jui is willing to ally himself with provincial governor. This video will end here.